It is Sunday night, ladies and gentlemen, and you know what that means. It means House of the Dragon, a return to Westeros, and a return to these Targaryen problems and drama that we just love to talk about so much. Thank you all of you who are in the chat who have left comments. I am so sorry that the stream is so incredibly late, later than the episode and later than when it was scheduled. I never know when I schedule these earlier in the afternoon what time is best, because if I do 10:15, and I guess I could start early, but then maybe people won't be prepared, but then I feel like it's never like 10:15 I start. It's either I start like right after 10 or I start at like 10:30. So here we are. We're back this week talking about episode 6 of House of the Dragon. It always throws me off because since I covered this show and She-Hulk, they're like 1 week off of each other. And so I always have to like remember which is which. Not that that matters that much. But let me get to y'all's chat because there's a lot to catch up on. And boy, good episode, good solid episode. I watched the part of the reason I'm always late to these is I watched the preview that comes at the end of the episode as well as the behind the episode, because I love hearing their thoughts on things. And when they discuss this as a second pilot, I think that's such a solid description for what this episode was. Like, with a giant time jump like this and older characters, like new cast, which I think worked out great, but we'll talk about that in a little bit, because I want to know people's opinions on that sort of thing, since I know we talked a lot about that last week. I'm gonna take my glasses off because they're bothering me. It's just super interesting kind of to see how things are playing out, and to hear it described that way, I just think was the perfect description for my thoughts about the episode. Like, it maybe wasn't the most plot consequential, but again, it's reteaching you I keep saying power players. It's reteaching you who are the players that we're dealing with, what the power struggle is, what the state of Westeros and the rest of the world and realm is, and kind of, reestablishing everyone in a new way, which I thought this episode did a great job of. So let's get to the chat. Alex is, of course, here. Hello, Alex. I hope you're doing well. Happy Sunday night. I looked at the movie palette site yesterday, and they had all movie palettes off 50%. They do. I noticed that too. And you used my discount code. Oh, thank you, Alex, so much. I need to go back in all my videos where this beauty has been set up. But I did a recent partnership with Movie Palette. If you are aware, they make these beautiful pieces of art based on your favorite movies. It's like the color scripts of the entire movie, and I just think it's a beautiful, great product. I wouldn't be talking about it if I didn't think it was quality and didn't think it was great. So there's my Disney fall streaming video was the one that was featured in, but I will include those codes in later videos in case you guys missed it. But thank you, Alex. That means a lot. I really appreciate that. When you started watching this episode, HBO Max crashed, or HBO crashed and glitched. Now I'm using HBO Max. May finish a little late, but I'm almost done with the episode. Okay, Alex, just know that we're going to be talking spoilers, so beware. Yeah, that was something. Has anyone noticed on HBO Max, which I would much prefer this glitch and to have to manually override it than not getting the episode for a good 20 minutes, because that's what my experience was watching Euphoria on Sunday nights on HBO Max. I do not pay for HBO. I have an HBO Max account. And if you were not aware, if you have an HBO Max account, the episode drops at the same time that it's releasing on HBO. I would highly recommend not getting it and then trying to skip to the end or something, because there may be issues with that. But when I log into HBO Max and I go to House of the Dragon, even if it's 9:05 or something and the newest episode is already up, one, it's not titled, so it will just be titled tonight's episode was titled episode 6 on HBO Max. That will change within the next 24 hours. They will update the title, but that's how it appears when it first shows up on the platform. And then the second thing is it always starts the last episode over again, which I think is just something that's it's just the platform not being able to calculate that, there's a brand new episode that they're actually on. Endoman agreed, felt like a second pilot, very much the same. I very much agree with that statement. Sorry, my audio cable is in the way. Swirly Bird is here. Man, the tension between all these characters is incredible. The new cast is bringing it in a way I didn't see coming. Agreed. I really love the actors who played Laenor and Laena, respectively. I thought they were fantastic, and I really, really And I have to speak from listen, they knew what they were doing. You guys all told me last week. But I was a little bit nervous about Emma D'Arcy taking over from Millie Alcock as Rhaenyra. That as the leading character, I felt like that was somewhat risky, because it's not really the way Game of Thrones did things, was replacing actors as they got older necessarily. And I wasn't sure, but I think she did a fantastic job. I like the spirit that she brings to Rhaenyra, but I think there's a little bit of that natural naivete or feeling of like, I can just get away with anything and it's gonna be fine, is gone, which has obviously shifted in the plot as well. And this Rhaenyra feels like one that isn't brand new. She feels very much like she's lived those last 10 years that we haven't seen, and that's brought kind of a sense of weight and maturity to her and her role, and now as a mother and as a wife and as the future heir, you feel that in her performance, which I think is something that then makes it feel smart to me that they changed the actress. Can't wait to hear my thoughts. Well, they're coming your way, Ando Man. Hopefully everyone's weekend is going great. Thank you guys just for hanging out in this chat. It's great. Now we get into the actual episode. Seeing Laena die, she went out like a dragon rider's death. I thought that was like a really great point to make in this episode, because as some of you may know, I don't have it with me tonight, but I am reading Fire and Blood. Again, I am only at Jaehaerys, who is Viserys's grandfather, so Rhaenyra's great-grandfather. That's the ruler that I'm on right now. They go kind of broken up by that. So I still don't even know that I'm 30% of the way through the book. I may be about there, but I haven't nearly gotten to the stuff that this show is covering. Hopefully, fingers crossed, this week will bring me time to get there. So I don't know necessarily a lot about what happens to Laenor or Laena. I know a lot of what happens to Rhaenyra and some of what happens to Daemon and stuff like that, just simply from skimming, because as I talked about last week, I have a problem and can't actually wait to read the book myself. I just had to skip to that part of the book and skim a couple pages, see what keywords I could pick up on, if that makes sense. And I think this is such a, I think it's so interesting, especially because when we talk about second pilot, and again, this isn't all my original ideas. Part of this is taken from the after the episode, behind the episode talk of the directors and the writers and the producers. But the fact that there is 2 times in this series a birth that is not going to be a successful birth where the mother and child survive the birth, with the first episode being Emma and then this episode being Laena. And to see how those 2 women handle it differently, how their husbands handle it differently, and what it means for them that they make the choices that they make. And I think what's interesting is Daemon in this episode, which I think he might have said something that I think I might have glossed over, so I may need to go back and check the episode again. But I think it's interesting that even though he goes after his wife and tells her not to kill herself, almost like he would maybe choose to save the mother and not the child if that were his choice, or do what he can. But he doesn't force her to undergo what Viserys did with Emma and not really tell her what's happening. Now, again, this isn't a medical thing where it's you get to pick the child or the wife. Who are you going to pick? It's just sort of it's not really a great outcome for either the child or the woman. And so I thought that was interesting. And then, of course, with Rhaenyra giving birth, and this was something that at first I was like, ooh, that's kind of nasty. But the episode opens with Rhaenyra giving birth to her 3rd son. And I think what's really fascinating is a lot of the sounds of birth, I guess the sounds and pains of labor, are the sound design of this episode was very interesting, where those are very much played up. It's very much called attention to, that there's things happening, and you just hear a lot of medical noises, I guess we'll call it. Just you hear birthing noises. We'll just put it that way. And what I thought was fascinating about that was, at first I'm kind of disgusted, but then I'm realizing Rhaenyra is scarred by the fact that her mother died in this gruesome childbirth that we saw in the very first episode of this show. And we get to see how that has affected her And the way she speaks of it afterwards is that her mother was used almost like as livestock to just produce children after children after children, yet never successful. And it drove her to the point of she literally died in the end. Her father killed her, in her eyes, killed her mother through this force, have a child, become pregnant, give birth, blah, blah, blah. And so I think to think of her every time, even though she does have 2 children, 2 successful, healthy births and deliveries and children, any time that she would be undergoing that process, she would be scared, uncomfortable, beyond just the pain of labor and giving birth to a child, but like it's a scarring to her. And I think that was part of why that sound was amplified in the way that it was, to really point out her discomfort. Okay, now I'm skipping down to the bottom. You guys are all joining. I love it. Yes, Sir Kristen, snitch, done with him. At least Cam can claim that she never liked him. I definitely was a supporter of his. Last week I was like, you're kind of, I can't believe you did this. I can't believe that you thought that Rhaenyra was going to give all of this up for you. I was ashamed of him then, but I can't take credit and say like, oh yeah, I never liked him either, because I definitely did. But yeah. Let me see. Jeremiah says this show throws death around like confetti. Also, hi Sasha. Hello, Jeremiah. It definitely does not take death lightly, and I feel like what's so interesting about the series is the way that they've chosen to do it. Like, it's obviously a choice to start the series slightly earlier than Rhaenyra's rule or anything, and I think it has to be explained because anytime someone comes to power in Game of Thrones, the way in which they come to power is extremely important. Like, that's almost as much of their story as being the king or the lord or whoever. It's like, how did they get in that position? And yeah, it's definitely, I think now I'm starting to feel like Alex says, like, this is much more OG Game of Thrones because, for a good portion of this series, there hasn't been a lot of people dying necessarily. There hasn't been too much craziness. It's sort of just been like, here's this family and here's the political stuff at play and blah, blah, blah. And now we're getting to, the death, the destruction, the consequences of all this political meddling. Yes, Alicent, and this is something that Cam pointed out in a couple streams ago, is that Alicent is sometimes described as worse than Cersei. Like the lengths that she goes to put her children on the throne, to protect her power. And I think what's interesting to see here, and that Christian, my fiance, pointed out, is how much power she has accumulated over the last 10 years. Since her green dress wearing incident, she has gained allies within the kingdom, people who will kind of support her, tell her the secrets, like really be there for her. How much the king in his weakened state does not really stand up against certain things she does. Of course, it's always like a give and take, but even when he like tells her like, it will be my way, like I will not do it your way, she's still accumulated power. Part of that through caring for the king, part of that being at his ear all the time, and almost in some ways, I'm sure, becoming almost like a pseudo hand, like to the king, replacement to her father, because he didn't necessarily want to dismiss him. It was more, I think, his hand was sort of forced into doing it and doing what's best for the kingdom after it was pointed out to him by both Daemon and Rhaenyra that was like the best way to go about things. Anyways, Alex asks, what are your thoughts on the new Alicent and Rhaenyra? I think they give all solid performances, but I think Alicent could steal the rest of the show. I definitely think I liked both of them. I think this was very much like an Alicent forward episode in terms of really restructuring from being this just friend of Rhaenyra's in the pilot episode to now she is a queen with children who are coming of age to take a throne if they were named heir, which they're not, and very much feeling alone and abandoned since she does not have any sort of connection to her father. Like, she's not really even writing letters to her father. She's she's now a woman in her own right, and I think there's definitely a level of power there that we got to see in this episode, which was fantastic and brilliantly portrayed by the older actress. I think Rhaenyra, like I said before, I kind of touched on this before I got to your comment, Alex, but she has a power to her now, a maturity, and she still has that I have to figure out my own way to go about this, and she has the unrelenting nature that she had as a child or a teenager, and her same feeling of like portraying strength and feeling like you're not going to tell me how it's going to go, like I will determine my own future and my own destiny and kind of how this plays out for me. And again, with being a mother, having to make choices that she would otherwise not make, I feel like we've seen her grow into her role, but also as she's grown older, kind of how the directors described, she can't get away with the same things she did as a child, and she's realizing that diplomacy really does have, before she could just nominate someone to the Kingsguard, Sir Cole, she could just disregard Alicent as queen, just pretend like that wasn't even happening. She could sleep with whomever she wished and not really have it be a huge consequence other than her marriage. And even in her marriage, she, as a younger girl, felt able to kind of control that, and she and Laenor came to their agreement. But in this episode, you really see that if she is truly going to become the heir and the queen of Westeros, she can't play around anymore. She really has to learn the best way to do things, because until she is seated on that Iron Throne, anything will and can be used against her. Can and will be used against her, I guess. Agreed, Andoman. I can't wait to see them interact again now that they're both parents, now that they're both more separated and removed from the crown at the royal power. I'm fascinated to see that come to play. And Alex, with this great fascinating tidbit, Aegon, of course, being Alicent and Viserys' firstborn son, is played by David Tennant's son, and David Tennant, of course, was the 10th Doctor on Doctor Who, whereas Matt Smith played the 11th Doctor. And so that's hilarious because by family tree accordance of the show, Daemon would be Aegon's uncle, or is Aegon's uncle, and David Tennant's son is almost like, I love that, Alex. That is such a great fun fact. That made my night. I love that. Luke, thank you so much for stopping by the stream. I hope all is well with you as well. I know, Nick. I know. That girl really, from the second episode, she showed up and said, like, I'm going to be a power player. And I think the thing is, even though it's tragic, or her death doesn't feel tragic in the same way because she had control over it. And I did think that was what was interesting about the, if you parallel, like, the wives of Daemon, he has the woman he was sleeping with who left him kind of her own accord, not wanting to be beholden to him. Then he has another wife who he goes to murder because, and he just kind of refuses to interact with it all. And now in Laena, I think he found a wife that was maybe like an equal in terms of kind of, it seemed like the way that they the way that they handled their marriage was extremely equal. And it's almost like this episode, when you see that they wish for different things, she wishes to go back to Westeros and he does not, or to go back to, well, Westeros encompasses Lord Corlys's lands, but she wants to go back and be with the family, and he does not want to do that. And so that's where their marriage kind of drifts apart. And I feel for her because I feel like they had such a sweet family, and the way that she was encouraging her daughter. And I don't know. Also, does anyone feel like there was a great skit on the one the internet hates for some reason that I just don't understand. Gosh, what is his name? James Corden. James Corden did a great, hilarious skit with Kim Kardashian, Kris Jenner, Khloe Kardashian and I believe Kylie Jenner. He did a skit with them called the Tarkashians or something like that, where they kind of combined, like, if the Kardashian family was in Game of Thrones and it was shot like a mockumentary, but it was still like House of the Dragon type situation. And it was really funny. And now I'm laughing because there's this whole new generation of Targaryens who are going to fight it out for the throne eventually. And like, I don't know. It's just, it's interesting. It's interesting. But yeah, I'm sad about Lena because I think she was a great character as little as we did get to see her on screen. You could just tell she was fearless, and she was, like Daemon, she was aware of the game. She was aware of the Game of Thrones. She was ready to play. She was ready to lose if she needed to have what she wanted in life. And that's just sad that she's gone. But of course, like, she's kind of a pure of heart character, and we all know that those kind of characters don't last long in Game of Thrones. Let me see. I feel Daenerys would have chosen a dragon rider's death too. In some ways, she sort of did. Maybe a little bit. Like, I know it's not exactly directly the same as Lena's, but she didn't die from a natural cause. She didn't die from anything. Like, she was killed right as she was going to ascend the Iron Throne. So in some ways, she kind of did. I think the thing that wasn't weird was they released the clip, which was basically the opening of this episode, of Laenor bursting into the room right after Rhaenyra gives birth to their third son, or their son, and as they're like going up the stairs to talk about the queen. So I felt like that was a very good strategic marketing choice because I was prepared for her. I think it's just the youthfulness of a young Rhaenyra, which obviously has to disappear, not only because your actor has changed, but the character is 10 years older. I believe at this point she's probably like in her early 30s. Because I believe last week, if I was doing the math correctly, I think she was like almost 22, 23-ish. So like 10 years, you know, that's where she's at. So yeah, it's just, I don't think it was as shocking as I thought it was going to be to see different actors in the role. I think that speaks to how good the casting department in this series is at their jobs. Nick is here, my good friend Nick. I constantly think about what Game of Thrones tattoo to get, but most of these people are murdered and smashed on. Yeah, I mean, you know, that's a solid point. I mean, like, unless you're gonna get like the Iron Throne or something, or like the specific house, you know, they're not always great characters. And this is something I've been really debating, because over the weekend I saw a couple of friends and we were all, of course, talking about like what we're watching on TV, and, you know, specifically I have a lot of friends who really actually are enjoying the Rings of Power, the Lord of the Rings series, and I am not. I just don't find the series interesting. I don't really have the impetus to watch it, other than the fact that it's something on TV that everyone's talking about, and I hate not having seen things like that. And it's coming out week to week, so it's pretty easy to keep up with. But at least in anyways, in all these conversations I've been having about which show is better, if it's a fantasy series, man, like, I just don't want to deal with like people who like have all their morals. Like, I don't know, like, I try to live my life as best as I can according to my own morals and like belief system and that sort of thing, and I don't need to watch a series where someone does that unless it's like for an interesting purpose, like Daredevil or Under the Banner of Heaven or something. Like, to see someone who is convicted in their faith be challenged by their faith, that's kind of the only thing I want to deal with. I don't listen, like, I feel like in Lord of the Rings they're all just too nice to each other, but we don't need to get on that. But yeah, Nick, that does make it difficult to be then a fan of Game of Thrones and want to be like, I want to make a permanent commitment to this show, but it's a show that has incest and murder and death around every corner on top of just anything. Like, they're like in love with and then, okay, Is King Viserys, is he a little bit of a hypocrite? Oh my god. Did we just see me fall? Yes. Yep, 20 people are watching. 20 people just watched that happen. Okay. Is King Viserys a little bit of a hypocrite? Yes, I think, because when Rhaenyra kind of intelligently is trying to like simmer everything down, not get everyone to hate on her in that like meeting, she's like, "Oh, listen. Our children should get married." So it would be Aegon. No, it wasn't Aegon. It was Helena marrying her firstborn. Jace is what they keep calling him. I think he obviously has a longer name than that, but Jace and Helena. So he would be marrying his aunt. But Viserys was not on board with Daemon marrying Rhaenyra. And I think that just speaks to Viserys is not for anybody who wants to climb to the Iron Throne. Like, he wants to give it to someone deserving, and I think he feels that he owes his daughter, very much so, owes his daughter the right to be heir. But I don't know, I just thought it was interesting that it's like, it's funny how in this series, because so much of the book is about the Targaryens obviously don't have a problem marrying cousins or siblings or anything like that, but when they come to Westeros, the people of Westeros and the faith in Westeros, which is different from the Targaryen belief system, and Velaryon, which is something I realized today. I saw like a reel that was saying like, you're saying this wrong from the House of the Dragon account. So I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm saying that wrong. So House Velaryon, they don't have a problem with the incestuous nature of it, but the church does. And so then to be taken seriously as rulers of Westeros and the Seven Kingdoms, they kind of cut back on that a little bit. So that's your little tidbit. Nick also says, my favorite part of the episode is watching everybody who agreed to play roles and keep secrets over the years get their breaking point and get still honor those promises they make. Yes. That's such a good description of what this show is yeah, like, I think the fascinating thing was to get to see, one of my favorite parts of the episode was the relationship between Laenor and Rhaenyra, and kind of how, like, as children, they thought, this is easy. Like, we know each other, we're friends, basically. Let's get married, do our duty, you can still do you can still love who you love, I'm gonna do my own thing, and, like, it's just gonna work out for us. But then they realize how easily and how quickly that what they thought was quick thinking and planning as children or teenagers, to be undone, or they underestimated the heavy scrutiny that they and their children would be under, specifically from Alicent and the King and that sort of thing. I didn't find Sir Criston annoying. I found him to be, I like the change in his character, because I think it is fascinating to see a white knight who is the King's Guard kind of become this, like, keeper of secrets and alliance for the Queen. And I kind of love how that relationship has twisted. Obviously, like, I want him to be a good guy, but I didn't necessarily know if he and Rhaenyra were going to end up together, because he's just of a different, like, status than her. And so that's just something that I didn't know was going to come around. I just don't think he's annoying, but I agree. He's petty. He's doing whatever he needs to do to serve his queen now over even his king. That's what I love. Kind of going back to Nick's comment, it's seeing the fact that he, even though he's sworn to be a knight of the King's Guard and uphold his vow, once he broke that vow with Rhaenyra, his vow then shifts to still be for the crown, but to be Alicent, who has this different relationship. And it's funny because it's like Sir Cole's personal relationship with Rhaenyra is impacting, like, his professional relationship with the crown at large. And I think those are the things that are really cool. And we have a super chat. I'm disappointed in Rhaenyra. She should have had at least one child by her husband to protect herself and her kids. She still seems very careless. Okay, And this is something I was thinking about the whole episode. Thank you so much, by the way, for the super chat. I do really appreciate it. It means a lot to me. But I think that speaks to the fact that that's more of a Laenor decision than it was Rhaenyra. Because I think Rhaenyra probably would have been wise enough to say, like, there will be scrutiny here. And especially after the first child, right? After the first child does not have white hair, does not have this Valyrian, Targaryen, trademark dominant gene, right? Like, doesn't have it. I feel like that is... And I think it goes to this comment that from Philip, talking about Laenor doesn't want to be in the delivery room and stuff, because it's obviously not, it's not necessarily, the husband doesn't necessarily have to be there, but it's also like it's not like he shouldn't be there. And I think the fact that he bursts in the room right after the baby's born, it shows he cares about Rhaenyra, he cares about the children, he cares about doing the right thing, but not in lieu of living his own life, having his lovers, kind of like being independent. And he takes the first opportunity he can to name it after Joffrey, his lover, boyfriend from the past. I feel like boyfriend is such an inconsequential term in the scope of Game of Thrones, but I mean it like obviously this person that he deeply loved and cared about. And so I think that is more of a Laenor, if you think about it, they get married, they rush the wedding the night that the love of his life has died, has been brutally murdered. And he gets married. So I'm sure, you know, like in the book, there's this huge, you know, there has to be the consummation of the marriage. And maybe like that was delayed in some way because of the grief, their age, whatever. But I feel like that could be a him thing, not a Rhaenyra being unwise and saying like, yo, like, listen, we got to do this thing. I think it's more of a his resistance to do it and him just feeling like, because I think they made a specific point this episode not to show like his disappointment. He kind of just doesn't care about the Game of Thrones. He just wants to live his happy, cushy life, and he, you know, has done his duty by marrying Rhaenyra, and he doesn't feel the need to have to be there to produce an heir. But Rhaenyra, by nature of being a woman, her right to the throne being questioned, she has to do that. And so I think it's, I don't know. I'm not trying to argue. I just feel like that is a Laenor choice rather than a Rhaenyra choice. Because it'd be easy to just say like, hey, listen, you got to do this. And so that's where I think that's kind of all stemming from. Let me go back. I'm sorry, guys. I feel like joining late allowed me to be so behind with comments and stuff. Do I think Sir Criston is kind of a bad guy? I don't think he's a bad guy, because if you look at his motivations, he in some ways has to be loyal to Alicent, because at any time she could go snitch on him, be like, yo, listen, this guy, like, she could ruin his life. She could have him be executed, take away the only thing he has to his name, which is being a knight in the Knight's Guard. And so his loyalty for her, that might start out as a loyalty to her for fear of having his secret kept, for gratitude for her intervening and him saving his life, basically. Intervening in him taking his own life, so then saving his life. And then over the course of 10 years, as Rhaenyra at that point doesn't even have her husband's children, but takes yet another lover or another person to have children with, and like how that would brew in him every time he sees these children, and then realizes like, I don't think he's a bad guy. I think he is a vengeful person, and I think that makes for a much more interesting character. I think that part of Laena's death that is just so sad is the fact that she had this kind of split-second opportunity to decide what to do with her own life, like how her own life would end. And I think at that point too, like, She's lost a child because this child obviously is not going to be born. She's lost her marriage because that's obviously crumbling over the course of the episode. And her children, she knows are kind of by their status of who they are, their lineage, they will be taken care of. So she kind of just decides to take this moment into her own hands, and it is really sad, and it is extremely just like, I think it's powerful. I think the way she died is very powerful. Yeah. So I don't feel bad for Damon. I feel for him in the sense that I think he did in some way love Lena. No, obviously he loves as much as a father in Game of Thrones can love his children, it seemed that he was at least affectionate toward them and like cares for them more than just being his children. But, or like heirs, I guess. I don't mean more than being his children. I mean more than just, oh, you're my heir, and so I will say like hi and bye to you. But like, he's more of a true father. Seems like maybe he's even a better father than Viserys was to Rhaenyra. But I don't necessarily feel bad for him because, like, you know, in some ways you could argue, like, he killed his other wife. And now the wife that he takes in her absence dies / has to sacrifice herself or take her own life before it's taken from her by this delivery that goes horribly wrong. I don't think I feel for him. I think it just, maybe that's the wrong word. I feel like it's just like, I just appreciate and love a complex television character so much. Like, I just want somebody who, like, somehow is just constantly like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they did that. And Damon reminds me a lot of the way I feel about Serena in The Handmaid's Tale. I think Serena is one of the best written characters on television today. I think she's truly just a fascinating study of, like, this woman who set up this world that now she's kind of a victim in because of a biological thing that she didn't have. And like, her, again, she's a character who, like, she believes certain things about the world, but then they don't come true for her, and blah blah blah, whatever. Anyways, I just think Damon, I like seeing his character continue to be what do you want to say, developed. I don't know, I feel like I'm losing my words here. I'm not communicating properly. But Swirly Bird takes the opposite thing of Sir Criston being a bad guy and says he feels for Sir Criston. You can tell he was broken after what happened, and now he's just gotten better. He just wanted to run away. Agreed. I find it interesting how he's chosen to. I do think that is a very powerful thing, though. If he was not to kill, like, attempt to take his own life, and Alicent stop him, I feel like that's such a powerful, pivotal moment for the reshaping of his character and where he goes after that. Aegon definitely feels like Joffrey and Alicent won't be able to control him like Cersei couldn't. I think he doesn't feel as cruel as Joffrey, but he definitely could get there. And I think what's interesting is, like, how what's interesting is in the book, Jaehaerys, who is Viserys' grandfather, he is named king at like 13, and then he kind of like runs away for a while until he's like 16 or 17 and able to ascend the throne and come back. And like, I think sort of what's being played up here with Aegon is like, he's very much still in the throes of adolescence. Like, when we first meet him in this episode, like, what is he doing? What is he up to? Or not first meet him, because that's when he's in the dragon's pit, but when he's in his room, which was just a very, like, teenage thing, and the way he looks at these girls, you can tell that he, as a ruler, is sort of distracted, and he's not necessarily been raised to take the throne, or he maybe doesn't have interest in it, but he doesn't even really have the, like, awareness of, like, this is something I might eventually want, so I need to, like, at least Rhaenyra, when she was his age, seemed to have this, okay, like, I want to do my own things, I want to, do what I want to do, but at the same time, I understand that there is a game afoot kind of situation. I know, Nick. The only reason I want to go to work tomorrow is to talk more about this episode. but yeah, I'm tired. I don't want to have to get off this stream to go to bed to wake up early. But this reminds me of WandaVision when Wanda's kids suddenly grow from babies into grade school age children, the way it time jumps. Yeah, I think the time jump is been used as a really effective tool in this series, and I think it's one that will be looked at in the future to be like, okay, how do you handle this in a way that isn't jarring? And doesn't make it so that every episode you have to do an exposition jump on where the characters have been. Because I always find it interesting to see how long into the episode when you find out how many years it's been. Like on the episode when they first did the 2-year time jump, that was like, oh, it's his second name day. So, like, okay, that's, you know what I mean? Like, it's stuff like that. I like that it's not just like 2 years later. Like, I wouldn't like that, but... Ben, what is up, Ben? Thank you for stopping by the stream. Hope you're doing well as well, my friend. I think I'm finally going to start House of the Dragon this week, so hopefully I can join on these live stream combos. Haha, have a good one. Thank you, Ben. I would love to know your thoughts on these episodes if you do choose to start watching the show. I think it's really good so far, and I think now is even like a great time to start because you can kind of binge all the younger Rhaenyra and Alicent stuff and get up to like the current timeline and then watch from here. I honestly love James Corden. He's charming. I think he is all of the same things, Jeremiah. I truly love him. I don't understand why the internet chooses to hate him so much. Like, I genuinely feel like there is this memo that was missed about like the entire internet just deciding we don't like James Corden. And I saw him get blamed a lot for the Cats movie. Like, he wrote it or produced it or like, no, like that wasn't him. And I'm just confused because I thought we all used to like Carpool Karaoke and the like across the crosswalk show. I think that's a funny thing too. And you have to know at this point, like maybe the first 2 times he did it, the drivers are like pissed. Like, really? He's doing this right here? Like, what is going on? But now you've got to know, like, you're driving right past like the CBS studio where he films his show. Like, I don't know. And I feel like if you live in LA, you know that that's happening. I don't know. I'm just a huge fan of his. And the Targashians, I think is what the skit was called. It was so funny. As a fan of both of those shows, it was hilarious to me. Jeremiah says, if I'm honest, I enjoy Rings of Power well enough. It's beautiful to look at. I like the often more relaxed pace, and many of the actors are charismatic. And I think it definitely has all of the things you've just described. I think my biggest critiques of that show is the world is supposed to be ancient, but it looks brand new. And I get that that's like more visually nice to look at. But like when I tune in to House of the Dragon, there's almost like there's this fog over the show a little bit, which some people might say, that's crappy. Like, it's not as good a quality. But I think it makes it look lived in. Everything, like the castles look worn. There's stuff to it that, like, this has existed for a while, whereas in Game of Thrones, in Rings of Power, they go up to those wood carvings in the trees, and they're, like, supposed to be thousands of years old, and yet they just look like clay that's just been carved. I think the thing that I just don't get about, again, I will continue to say this, I still, at this moment in time, have not seen any of the Lord of the Rings movies, and I know, for shame, in the streets, like Cersei walking through King's Landing. I haven't watched them, and I honestly, like, it's probably something I will eventually get around to doing, but it's just like, again, I have my thing about media, and there's not enough time to watch everything, so I'm gonna watch something that I don't think I would enjoy. And I think Rings of Power, it's just, I think it almost tries to be overly cinematic at times because of how well regarded those movies were. And anyone who's like passionate about Middle Earth or the Lord of the Rings stories or any of Tolkien's work, like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you like, oh, that show sucks, like blah, blah, blah. It's just not for me personally. The same way that I seem to be the only person who likes She-Hulk and nobody else does. And that's just the way things are. And that's just something you have to accept at a certain point in time. Like, okay, I'm going to like stuff that literally no one else likes. Or everybody else has more of critiques on it than I do. That's just how I feel. Do you think at the final season of the series we may see Emilia Clarke Daenerys? No. And here's the reason, Alex. This is still, what's happening now is still 200 years prior to Daenerys. And I feel like this series is leading up to the wars of Aegon and some other people who, again, I'm not going to spoil. You could go look up what happens in Fire and Blood, the book. It's all out there. You can go find it for yourself. I'm not going to be the one to spoil it here. But I think we're leading towards that war and then setting up the next. Like, I don't think that this show realistically will continue to cover 200 years of the rest of the book. Because at that point, why wouldn't you start with Aegon the Conqueror and then just make this like a 20-season show and just like go down the line? So no, I don't think there's any chance that we get to that unless they're like 200 years later. And then like, I just doubt that that's going to happen. The other problem is then you have the issue of you have Emilia Clarke at, say the show runs for 8 seasons as long as Game of Thrones. That's 8 years from now, doing some quick math, that's 2030. Or say 2029. And Emilia Clarke will be 8 years older than she is now, playing a version of herself that was almost like 20 years younger at that point. And I just don't think that would work. I just think that's too much. If House of the Dragon is at next year's Emmys, who do you think has a better chance to be nominated? Young Rhaenyra or Alicent or older versions of them? That's a good question. I mean, honestly, maybe both. Because that's not, like, you can have, that's the thing about the Emmys that is something that doesn't happen in other, like, at the Oscars, this doesn't usually happen because people are separated into, there's supporting roles and leading roles. And I don't know if Alicent is a supporting character, which I think she's maybe, I think she might classify as a supporting character. Maybe not. Hypothetically, both older Alicent and younger Alicent could be nominated. I don't think it matters that they're, because they're even technically billed as different characters as like young Alicent and young Rhaenyra. So I think it could be both of them. I think it's too early to tell at this point how the older actresses, I think they'll have bigger scenes probably than these younger actresses had so far. But yeah, I don't know. I think we'd have to see more to see. Heads up, one more big time jump after episode 7, then we're done for them for the rest of the season. See, and that's what I thought. Like, Aegon has to come of age is the situation. And potentially other people who potentially may not be born yet, or who potentially were just born, or something of the sort, those people would have to be like actual characters within the story at a certain age that either they can age for the rest of the, sorry, I just hit my mic. Either they can age to a point of importance in the story, or that they're already at that age of importance and have established actors. And I think they probably want to get to the point by like beginning of season 2. That's the last time they're introducing characters that are existing with new actors. Unless, like I said, there's somebody who's like either going to grow up or whatever. I doubt that there's going to be more time jumps. Yeah, I'll miss James Corden too. That is sad that he's leaving late night, but I feel like that's something that you probably don't want to do forever. You know? I don't know. Maybe you do. Maybe you don't. Philip asks, and this seems like it might be the last comment before I do my little review thing, and then probably go because it's almost 11:30 my time. Having read the Aegon the Conqueror chapters of Fire and Blood, do you think a show on him could work, or is the fighting too one-sided? That's a great question. I think the fascinating part of his story is almost what happens once he has children. And Aegon the Conqueror has 2 wives who are both his sisters. So, you know, in classic Game of Thrones Targaryen fashion. He has Visenya and Rhaenys, I believe, are the names of his wives. And there's kind of dispute then between their children over, of course, you know, the ever important question, who will sit their pretty bottom on that Iron Throne? Who's going to be heir? Who's going to take over? And so that's kind of like a big question, and they kind of go off and like do their own things. And at that stage of Game of Thrones, or excuse me, at that point in the book, they all have, or that era of Targaryens, they all have dragons, and they're all like riding dragons. Whereas like as you get into later generations, if someone's named an heir and not a dragon rider, it's kind of sus. You know, that's kind of like, I don't know about that. Which is sort of where this is interesting in this episode, that Rhaenyra's children have dragons, yet the younger son of King Viserys does not. So that's an interesting thing. But I definitely, looking back on the battles, they're not, it's not completely one-sided, but I do think in terms of warring, I think it'd be more interesting kind of to see where maybe, I think honestly, yeah, it might be a little too one-sided. I don't doubt that there could be a show about him in the future between how much he is referenced within this series and Game of Thrones. But I do just think it would be a little too difficult because he sort of takes over, and then there's this really long period of his reign that's, if I remember correctly, peaceful. Like it's a decent length of time, and then it's kind of his kids where stuff is more of a give and take, which I think might make for a more interesting television series. But I'd be interested if they would return to this book. I guess I don't know how much. I think there's just this book and then the Game of Thrones books, right? Like I don't know that or the Song of Ice and Fire books. I don't know that there's much more for them to draw from. But I know they're talking about making the Jon Snow prequel series. Or not prequel, the Jon Snow series of like him beyond the wall. So, you know, I feel like maybe it'd be smarter if they went and made like a story about the Dornish, of the Dorne, the country of Dorne, and the Dornish rulers and their stuff, because they're almost always at war with the Targaryens. Like the Dornish just don't want to get along with anyone. They just want to rule by themselves, yet they're kind of a part of the Seven Kingdoms, so there's always that give and take. And I think that would be really interesting to have a TV show about that. But I'm gonna do my quick little review that I do. You don't need to leave the stream yet, although we'll be ending after this part, so if you gotta go, totally understand. But I'm just gonna do a little quick review of the episode so I can kind of cut the clip and put it up. I'm so sorry. I have now missed 2 episodes, and as much as I want to let them go, there's a part of like a completionist in me that feels like I need to have all of the episodes available in a playlist of all my reviews beyond just these live streams, because I know these can be kind of lengthy. So those will at some point be coming. Hopefully tomorrow I can just kind of dump them all here on the channel, and apologies that for maybe the next 2 days you won't see anything more than that. But some great content coming later in the week, and today I started brainstorming all of my concepts and goals for October for the channel. Thank you guys also for the support this month on the channel. It's been my biggest month of the year, and I just want to say thank you, like literally in every way possible, in subscribers, in views. Like you guys have just blown me away with your support this month, this season, this month, and so thank you. Okay, now for my quick little review. Make sure we're all ready to go here. Okay. It is Sunday night, which means last night, how do I want to start this? Welcome back to Westeros for yet another episode of House of the Dragon. The 6th episode of House of the Dragon reintroduced us to a lot of characters we spent the rest of the season with new actors and actresses playing them, and as was described by people online and as well as the creators of the show in the behind the episode portion after the episode airs on HBO and HBO Max, you can watch it there. But they discuss this being a second pilot of sorts, and in a lot of ways it mirrors kind of the certain events that happen in the pilot, which I found really helpful and interesting and kind of reestablishing this same world, this same timeline of Game of Thrones, but just slightly later. And I think, first and foremost, I think the new actors and actresses of Rhaenyra, Alicent, Laenor, and Laena, Targaryen, and Velaryon, they did a fantastic job. I think everyone really just elevated what that character has experienced, and they very much made the roles feel lived in, to where I'm not looking at this and saying, this is a different lady trying to do an Alicent impression. It's very much like, oh, Alicent has just matured. These things that have happened over the last 10 years have really affected her, or Rhaenyra, or Laenor, or whoever. And I think the story also is written in such a way to make you feel like people's emotions have been affected by stuff we haven't even seen on screen. And I think that's really interesting. Like, it's not... Again, this show continues to be so good about jumping forward in timelines and not making you feel as a viewer that you have to sit through reestablishing of... You have to sit through a lot of expository information to reestablish this world or this universe that you live in. Or that the story is taking place in. It very much just feels like you're back in it, you're living through it. And I think a large part of that was the way that this episode opened, kind of the establishment of where Rhaenyra is, how she's handling her relationship with Alicent and the crown at large, and kind of, again, reestablishing where all these characters are and who's maybe come and gone in the last 10 years and become a part of it, like Sir Harwin as the father of Rhaenyra's children outside of Laenor and that sort of thing. And I really, really applaud and commend this episode for the way that that was all handled. One of the things I specifically really liked about this episode was in the opening scene when Rhaenyra is giving birth to her third child. I noticed in kind of an uncomfy way, and maybe you did too, the fact that some of the sounds of labor, delivery, and birth were kind of louder than they should have been, or overemphasized to the point where, like, I'm not really sure that that's what, like, it would sound like, if you know what I know, or you know what I'm saying. But I feel like that was done because, of course, the pilot of this show, the pilot of House of the Dragon, opens with Rhaenyra's mother, Emma, giving birth and dying in labor. And Rhaenyra explains throughout many episodes in the young Rhaenyra timeline that she is terrified of having children, that she does not want to be used as like a livestock cattle for heirs. She does not want to risk dying. She does not want to have to go through the things that her mother was driven to by her father's need to produce heirs. Like, she just does not want to deal with that. And of course, she's traumatized by the fact that this is a gruesome, tragic way for her mother to die, and that could very well happen to her, despite the fact that she's had 2 successful pregnancies and deliveries of 2 healthy boys who are her older sons. But I think that was something to, like, really, reestablish where Rhaenyra comes from in this episode. I think the other great thing that was played up is how Rhaenyra's motherhood has given her a maturity in this new situation. Like, you feel very much like this Rhaenyra is the same Rhaenyra in the past. She still is contrarian sometimes to the way that the king and Alicent are handling things. She's still in opposition to them, but she's realizing she can't do it as blatantly and as impassioned or recklessly as she maybe could as a youth, and now she has to go about it in a much more intelligent way. And I think some of that stems from seeing her as a mother. She has children now to protect. She has a husband who, in many ways, she kind of has to stand in for, she has more power than him in this family dynamic relationship. And I think what's fascinating too is, while this motherhood that Rhaenyra has experienced that has fundamentally changed her, it also continues to prove to the men in the room, or the people who would have her not be heir, who would have Aegon take over in her place, when, like, her being a mother and her being a woman is, the underlings of that, or her being a woman being the kind of subtext of motherhood, is when she's standing in the king's table and she's giving this really diplomatic, great reasonable, like, let's have our children marry, let's settle this dispute once and for all, I apologize for my wrongdoing, like, let's just settle this. And of course, part of that's to protect herself, because of course the speculation is on her that Laenor is not the true father of her children, and therefore they're illegitimate children, and that would kind of default the throne to Aegon and Alicent's heirs. But right as that is happening, her breast milk comes in, and you see the full effects of being a mother is kind of undercutting her ability to be queen, yet she has to be a mother to produce heirs. And that's like the part of this that Viserys or any other male king or ruler does not have to deal with, because he doesn't have to be responsible for the raising of the children, of the taking care of the children, and his parenting can kind of be separated from the choices that he makes, like, for the family. And I just thought that was, I'm not articulating it the way I wish I could, but I thought those were both very profound moments to define that motherhood for Rhaenyra, as much as it has matured her and in some ways potentially given her power and protection because she does have heirs, it has also stripped her of it is a constant reminder of those who would choose a male heir versus her to be the next ruler of Westeros. The last thing I want to touch on is, of course, the way that the death of Laena kind of parallels the death of Aemma in the first episode, and yet is so different, because much like Aemma's pregnancy with Balon and her labor that turns into a situation where she and the child cannot both be saved, or she is going to die anyways, Laena takes this destiny kind of into her own hands to say, no, I will die this specific way. I will not have this be taken from me. And I think that is something that probably will greatly impact her children, her two daughters, who might find themselves in a similar situation one day. And I thought that was just a really clever way to show that the differences between Daemon and Viserys, although we might assume Daemon to be more cruel than Viserys, he was trying to stop Laena from taking her own life and ending her life because of this stillborn child, whereas Viserys would do whatever it took to get this male heir, even killing his own, like, beloved wife. And I think that the level of complexity that, even though I hate that Laena can no longer be a part of the story because she has just kind of been, you know, she's been a regular figure since those days when they were trying to have her marry Viserys. She's been around, and I think it adds a really interesting, I hate to say footnote, but like level of complexity and backstory to Daemon to show this side of him that is not necessarily this cruel, dastardly character, and rather someone who potentially would have and potentially will make different decisions than his brother, who was, you know, a decent man but not a great king. And I love the way that this series is kind of pitting that humanity and like the side of you that in a normal world might make you good against what it takes to survive in the world of Game of Thrones. But please let me know what you thought of this episode in the comments down below. Please also be sure to like this review if you enjoyed it, and be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss my post-episode reviews on live stream, and then these clips that go up the Monday morning after. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have an absolutely amazing day or night whenever you're getting to watch this, and I will see you in my very next video. Bye, everyone. Whew. We made it through, guys. We made it through. I am dying a little bit. I'm out of breath and I am tired, and I want to let you guys all go. Thank you so much for joining me in this live stream tonight. Thank you for the super chat. Again, what was the name? Ethereal Tori. Thank you so much for the super chat. I so appreciate you, and all of you who just watched this video, this review, this live stream. I can't think of the words. Thank you again. Thank you for the support on this channel. It really means a lot to me this month. It's just been very personally gratifying to see effort be put into videos and that really pay off with the viewership and your support. So thank you again. I will be back tomorrow, like I said, with all of the reviews of this show that I have missed just for consistency. Probably no one cares but me, but I'm going to put them up there anyways. Have a great night, everyone, and I will see you very, very soon later on this channel.